Our next lecture will come from Andrea Berlin, who's the James R. Wiseman Chair in Classical Archaeology and Professor of Religion at Boston University. She has a PhD in the Hellenistic and early Roman period from the University of Michigan. Dr. Berlin is a former Fulbright Distinguished Scholar and an award-winning teacher and lecturer who's written and edited 6 books and over 70 articles about life in the ancient Near East, from the time of Alexander the Great through the Roman period. She's also an active field archaeologist who's been working in the Eastern Mediterranean for over 40 years at projects from Troy in Turkey to Koptos in southern Egypt to Paestum in Italy. And most recently, she's wrapped up over 10 seasons of excavation at Tel Kedesh in Israel, where she co-directed a team that uncovered an imperial administrative compound dating from the 5th through the 2nd centuries BC. In the late 80s, she even directed the Dulles Airport Archaeological Excavation and Survey Project in Washington, D.C. Nothing from Alexander the Great there. But that's the topic that we asked her to address today, the Alexander effect in Archaeology of Celebrity. So please help me welcome back to La Sierra University, Dr. Andrea Berlin. Andrea.
Okay. Celebrity seems like something that just obsesses us today, but actually, what I want to prove to you is that Alexander started it all. It was he who was, I think, arguably the first global celebrity. And when we think about celebrity today, you know, in addition to thinking about beautiful women, like the ones that you see here on the screen, we think about a certain concatenation of characteristics. First of all, a celebrity is a real person. You know, this is an important thing to point out because we think from antiquity about gods and goddesses and heroes and myths. But for us today, and also I will argue for Alexander and for people in the past, a celebrity was an actual real person. Today, in addition to being a real person, a celebrity is somebody who has boundary-breaking fame in his or her own lifetime. As well, an image that is readily recognizable. After all, to have fame, you have to have an image that people can recognize. And a persona that is widely channeled even after death. I mean, a persona that lives on. So that image that needs to be readily recognizable for a celebrity, it needs to be in many media over for many, many audiences. Funny, not funny, you name it. Now, the Greeks, they had a single word to capture the idea of celebrity. And that word was kleos. You know how it is that there are in many languages a word that you cannot translate? You have to have that word only in that language. I spent a considerable amount of very fun time Googling around for big concept words in other languages that we don't have in English. And I actually printed out about 1.5 pages list of them, so somebody should hit me up in the reception because I brought 2 copies. Very, very fun words. Words like this tell you something really important about a culture. They tell you something really important about what matters to people and how a particular society or a particular culture decides what matters. Our word celebrity had a Greek analog, and that Greek analog, kleos, is just one of the many ways that we can find ourselves in such cognitive cahoots with the Greeks that we can think about them the same, in many of the same ways as us. So kleos, this one great big concept, this celebrity concept, was a dream of the Alexanders. You just heard this beautiful talk from Kent about how Alexander changed the world and was responsible for this beautiful cultural fusion. He was a great military commander. He won all his battles. I'm not talking about any of that. What I want to prove to you is that in addition to all of that other highfalutin stuff, Alexander cared about celebrity. And he was very purposeful about it. He went after it. He went after it in the way that in ancient Greece, people became filled with kleos, filled with celebrity. And there were 5 components. So you don't have a little scorecard, but if you want to take notes, there are 5 components to getting your kleos cup, to getting your celebrity cup. The first one is that ancient Greece was a world of contests with winners. It was a world with games and athletics and all kinds of performances, and not just for fun and not just for entertainment, but for prizes, for real. And so you're looking here, for example, at the Stadium at Olympia, where the foot race was held, and you see one of those foot races on an amphora from the city of Athens. They had their own festival in honor of the goddess Athena. And what's a festival and what's a contest if you don't have a prize? Contests and winners permeated Greek culture. Contests and winners is one of the 5 components to getting your kleos ticket in ancient Greece. Second, heroes and their stories, because stories are what make people memorable to us. We really love stories. We care about them. That's how we bother to remember who people are. Kent just gave you a great story about Alexander's life, and especially his conquests over all of Asia. Heroes in the Greek world were rife. They were all throughout Greek culture, and we know about them because the Greeks put pictures of them everywhere they could, on temple pediments, on temple metopes, and especially on pots. So here's one really famous pot. I'm only going to show you the one. I could show you a whole bunch. I'm only going to show you the one. This is a good one, though, because it's filled with heroes and stories. One of the most famous of the Greek heroes was a dude named Peleus. He, along with his friend Meleager, killed the Caledonian boar, and you see that boar here in the top frieze of this pot. Peleus was a hero who committed so many great feats that the gods rewarded him by giving him a goddess as a bride to marry. And the offspring of the union of Peleus and his bride Thetis was probably the greatest Greek hero of them all, Achilles, who is also shown on this famous vase, on the handle of the vase. And if you wouldn't have been able to recognize these heroes, don't worry. As long as you can read, it's okay, because they're all labeled. Every single one of them is labeled on this amazing vase. So the Greeks were very interested in the person who painted this vase, a dude named Clytius, was very interested in you being quite aware of exactly who all the heroes and their stories were. Number 3, recognition via attributes. You know, one of the things that's pretty interesting about Greek art and Greek depiction is that all those famous people, all those heroes, all those gods, all those goddesses, they look like us. Or you might think of it as we look like them. In other words, we all look alike, just people. So how do you recognize a god? How do you recognize a hero? How do you recognize them if they just look like a person? Well, every famous person, every person with kleos, had an attribute. So here you see Hermes with his caduceus, and you see Zeus with his little thunderbolt. That might not look like a thunderbolt to you, to take my word for it. That's a thunderbolt. Or Athena with her helmet. If you get a whole Athena, that is a statue of her, then you have, she has a breastplate, she has a spear, so she's got the whole getup. Recognition via attributes. As Kent just told you, when Alex was a kid, he learned about Homer. Everybody learned about Homer. Homer was the text. Homer was the guide. Homer was the word from which Greek culture sprang. And of all the words that we have from Homer and all the famous battles and all the famous people that he discusses, the one who is the most famous is Achilles, the son of Peleus, the hero of the Iliad. And Achilles in the Iliad speaks the words that let us know that to be famous, to have kleos, was to have enduring glory. There's this beautiful quote. Mother tells me, the immortal goddess Thetis, with her glistening feet, that two fates bear me on to the day of death. If I hold out here and I lay siege to Troy, my journey home is gone, but my glory, my kleos, never dies. The last of the five, are you with me? Right, we already got to five, is ascendance. Ascendance through achievement. There is one hero whose stories, whose contests, whose wins was the most characteristic, the most transcendent for the Greeks for this aspect. And that hero was Heracles, who is shown in lots of Greek art, like all of these dudes, all of these heroes, but especially wonderfully at the sanctuary, the big sanctuary at Olympia. So we were just at Olympia a little bit ago. We looked at the foot race stadium, which is now here outlined in yellow. In the middle of the sanctuary was the huge temple to the god Zeus, in whose honor the entire sanctuary was organized. And on the temple, on metopes that were, let's see if I can do this here, on the inside, so not these metopes, these little things on the outside of the temple, they're called metopes. On the inside, there were 6 metopes in the front and 6 metopes in the back. 6 and 6 equals 12. What does 12 put you in mind of? I'll tell you what it puts you in mind of, the labors of Heracles. All 6 of them were on the metopes of the Temple of Zeus at Olympia. I'm only going to show you 2, the very first one and the very last one. In the very first one, Heracles kills the Nemean lion. And in the very last one, this is my favorite metope. You just have to indulge me for a second while I explain this to you. He is tasked with retrieving the apples of the Hesperides. The apples of the Hesperides are at the far ends of the earth. He's not allowed to go there. Only the god Atlas, whose day job it is to hold up the earth, he's the one who's allowed to go there. So Heracles agrees to hold up the earth for a little while so that Atlas can go get the apples of the Hesperides. The earth is very heavy, so Heracles has a pillow to help him. See the pillow? Right there. Now, you see the problem? He's holding up the earth. Both hands are working. And Atlas comes back with the apples. What's he supposed to do? He can't drop the earth. So Athena, one-handed, because she's a goddess, so she's very strong, one-handed just holds things up for a second while Heracles can get the apples from Atlas so that he can then achieve what is the hero's ultimate goal and due, which is immortality. Heracles was a very popular dude among Greek artists, and the way that he got recognized was by an attribute, because heroes get recognized by attributes. And the attribute that he gets recognized by is the skin and the head of the lion that was his first labor. So he wears the head of the lion as a helmet. And that's how you know when you look at a picture with some dude doing something crazy, like petting what looks here like a 2-headed dog, but was actually a 3-headed dog, Kerberos, the hound of hell, you can recognize that it's Heracles. All right, so 5 elements to achieving kleos. This was Alexander's birthright. So I wasn't going to make you have to remember those 5 things. As you saw very briefly there on the left, the 5 elements of kleos were listed out, so let's see if we can all remember them. Element 1, contests and winners. Element 2, recognition by attributes. That might have been number 3. Which one is number 2? Is somebody taking? Very good, heroes and stories. What's number 4? Beautiful. And what's number 5? Excellent. It's gold stars all around. So these were the elements that Alexander, I want to prove to you, deliberately, systematically went after, one by one. And he was quick about it. He does it almost all in the very first year of his campaigns. So here what you see is just again what Kent was telling you about. When he was a youth, between the ages of 13 and 16, he was tutored on his home turf by Aristotle, and he was given as a textbook to read the Iliad. So I'm sure you're right, Kent, that the larger, deeper philosophies of the Iliad really mattered to Alexander, but I want to say that actually the storyline of Achilles and the storyline of getting glory through epic, that all of that also really mattered to Alexander. And so here we go, with Alexander in pursuit of the Kleos Cup, of enduring celebrity. All right, let's see. So first stop, of course, has to be Troy. I mean, he's got a copy of the Iliad in his pocket, and that's exactly where Achilles meets his enduring fame. So Troy is the place that he goes. He crosses the Hellespont, and we know from the historian Arrian that he very, very deliberately imitates the steps that will put him in the same camp as Achilles. So at the beginning of the spring, he marches towards the Hellespont. With his own hand, he steers the ship across. We don't actually have any idea if Achilles does this. Homer doesn't tell us Achilles does this. In the middle of the channel, he sacrificed a bull to Poseidon and the Nereids, poured forth a libation from a golden goblet, was the first man to step out of the ship in full armor. He goes up to the citadel at Troy. These are the walls, the famous walls of Troy, which were standing in the time of Alexander, as they still are today, obviously, since I took this picture, so you can tell. He then went up to Ilium, that's Troy, and he offered sacrifice to the Trojan Athena, and he set up his own panoply in the temple as a votive offering, and in exchange, took away some of the arms which had been preserved from the time of the Trojan War. Whose arms were those? Those were the arms of Achilles. Now, of course, that's not really true. I mean, that's impossible. There was no temple of Athena at the time of the Trojan War, even if the Trojan War really did take place, which we are not going to debate here. But this was the story, for sure, that he took his own armor off and left it in the temple, because you can't take things out of the temple. You can't just take them. You have to swap. And he took the armor of Achilles, and then he encircled the tomb of Achilles with a garland and pronounced him fortunate in having Homer as the herald of his fame to posterity. So the very first of the deeds that he does is in pursuit of number 5 on the list, no, number 4 on the list, enduring glory via epic. If we do have time for questions afterwards, somebody has to remember to ask me about the date of the tumulus of Achilles at Troy, because I worked at Troy for many years, and I am the person who looked at the pottery that dated the tumulus. But I'm not telling you now. You have to ask later. We have lands to conquer and fame to acquire. We must move on. Okay, here's the Granicus River that you heard all about from Kent. I'm not talking about the battles at all, so it's a very good thing that Kent talked about them. I'm not talking about them. I can just tell you, he wins them all, and now we're moving on. He wins them all, we're moving on, and his win at Granicus opens up the entirety of the coast of Asia Minor. All these cities, many, many, many of them, people just come out and open up the gates and say, Alexander, we've been waiting for you, so glad that you're here. In a couple of places, he does have a bit of a scuffle Halicarnassus, Miletus, we don't need to dwell. Anyway, what does he do with all of these cities and all of these places where they're very, very happy to see him? What is that? That is backwards. Okay. Well, that purple part was supposed to go away, but never mind. He establishes mints. He establishes mints. What happens in a mint? Exactly. Very good. You guys are very good. Coins. Okay. Now, bonus question. Who is on the obverse, the head of this coin? Who is this? This is a trick question. The numismatists will tell you, all the numismatists will tell you, that this is Heracles. Because he has a lion's head helmet, and that's how we told you that you can recognize Heracles. But I will say that the person that these coins really need to put you in mind of, the person that they certainly put me in mind of, is Alexander himself. And I will point out that on the reverse, it's got his name. So if you just get one of these coins, I don't think you think, oh, this is Heracles. I think you think this is Alexander. It's got his name on the reverse. I would just like to have a word with all the numismatists who identify the figure on the front as Heracles. I don't think that's right. So check. So we had enduring glory via epic, and now we have recognition via attributes. Next. Does this look like a place that should be next to go to? No, it does not. It is out of your way. It is in the middle of Anatolia. It's all the way up near Ankara. This place, called Gordion, is Alexander's next stop. And it's not for a military reason, let me tell you. Who has heard of the name Gordion? Why? The knot, of course. The knot. When Alexander came to Gordion, he had a very strong desire to go to the Acropolis, where the palace of Gordius and his son Midas was, to see Gordius's wagon and the knot on the yoke of the wagon. Because there was a story about the wagon, that whoever undid the knot of the yoke was destined to rule Asia. Now that is a good story, let me tell you. So Alexander goes to Gordion, and we know from Arion that this was one complicated knot. It was so complicated that for hundreds of years, nobody had been able to undo it. It was made of cornel bark, and it was impossible to see where it began or ended. Alexander could not discern how to undo the knot, but he did not wish to leave it still fastened. They say he struck the knot with his sword and cut through it, claiming that it was now undone. The second question that you need to ask me when we have time or in the reception is, did we really find the place where the cart and the knot were? Because Gordion is another place that I work. I'm not going to tell you now, but you have to ask me afterwards. So, what have we got here? Number 3 on the list, or number 2 on the list, but number 3 in this list, heroes and stories. Okay. After going to Gordion, Alexander fights another battle, fights the battle at Issus. He wins. And then he moves down the coast. It's not exactly a cakewalk moving down the coast, incidentally, I have to tell you. Tyre, as you just heard, there was a great big siege. There was also a great big siege at Gaza. There had been, just a few years before Alexander got to this area, some dissension in the city of Sidon against Alexander, but by the time he arrives hot on his victory from Issus, the folks at Sidon are more receptive to Alexander by this time. Now here we're going to get another one of the items on the checklist checked off, but it's not exactly because Alexander himself does something here. We have a really fabulous artifact, very large artifact, from the city of Sidon, which you may have heard of. It is the so-called Alexander sarcophagus, which is a sarcophagus that doesn't have anything to do with, or that is to say, it wasn't made for Alexander. Now, I'm only going to say a couple of things very briefly about this because you're going to hear all about the Alexander sarcophagus in detail with beautiful pictures very soon from Jessica. But I do want to say that what we've got on the sarcophagus are two big stories, one on one long side, one on the other long side. And what is depicted here shows that ideas about Alexander were current and flowing around at this time such that they could be turned into pictures on the sarcophagus of the king who was buried here. So maybe I didn't explain this exactly, but a sarcophagus is a thing, it's like a coffin, it's the thing you get buried in. And there were many kings of Sidon, there was a whole progression of kings. And the last king of Sidon was buried in the sarcophagus. So on one side of the sarcophagus, there's a battle scene, and Alexander is very recognizable. Why? Why can we recognize this as Alexander? Why? Exactly, because he's wearing the lion's head helmet. So we know that the person who was buried in the sarcophagus wants to identify and recognize Alexander in battle. What's more interesting is what's on the other side of the sarcophagus. So on the other side of the sarcophagus, there is a contest, a game. It's a hunt. It's a hunt scene. It's a scene of a lion hunt. And there's Alexander again, and he's winning. There's a contest in which he is winning. And the thing that I really find very interesting about this depiction of Alexander is that he's a real person in it. He doesn't have something that necessarily sets him off. He doesn't have the lion's head helmet on his head. He is participating, like all the rest of these guys are participating, in a contest because this is something that celebrities or people who are after kleos do. And this was already, by this time, part of Alexander's persona. Okay, so far we've gotten 4 components Alexander has racked up in the course of just a year and a half, 4 components of the kleos cup. Enduring glory via epic, recognition via attributes, heroes and stories, contests and winners. What are we missing? What are we missing? Yes. A sentence. Where do you go if you need a sentence? Egypt, which is next on the list. So, this is another place that is militarily completely unnecessary. There's no army there. The Persians are not defending it. There is no, and in fact, Alexander doesn't fight any battles there at all. He goes for one reason only, to check off this last element in his pursuit for celebrity. Alexander was seized with a longing to visit Ammon in Libya. His intention was to consult the god, as the oracle of Ammon was reputed to be truthful. And it was said that Perseus and Heracles, famous hero dudes, had consulted it. Alexander wanted to rival Perseus and Heracles since he was descended from them both, and was also seeking to trace his birth back to Ammon, just as mythology traces that of Heracles and Perseus to Zeus. He set out for Ammon in this frame of mind with the intention of finding more exactly about his origins. The journey along the coast as far as Parætonium was through deserted country. From there, he turned inland where the oracle of Ammon was to be found. The road is deserted, sandy for the most part, and without water. You have to really want to go to this place. It is hard. Here's how hard it is. When I was doing some additional research, when I was preparing this lecture for you guys, I found this amazing travel log blog from a guy named Jacques. Jacques, Travels of a Life, as you see down there at the bottom. Jacques went to Siwa. And it took him a while, and he had motorized transport. He started in Cairo, so Alexander probably started, in the area of Alexandria, but so you can take off the 2.5 hours by motorized transport from Cairo. 3 hours just by car across the coast, 3 hours down from Marsamutra to Siwa. Alexander had camels. They don't go as fast as cars. So this was some serious seeking that he was after. The area where the sanctuary of Ammon is situated is circular in shape, completely deserted, covered with sand, waterless, but the site itself full of garden trees, olives, and palms, because it's this giant oasis in the middle of the desert. We have 3 ancient sources for what happens to Alexander when he goes to Siwa. 3 different sources. 4 in a way, if you count Strabo quoting Callisthenes. Callisthenes says that the priests permitted the king alone to pass into the interior of the building. Answers were not given, as at Delphi, in words, but chiefly by nods, maybe because they didn't all speak the same language. And the man told the king in express terms that he was the son of Zeus. Zeus and Ammon were considered one deity. I mean, who the Egyptians called Ammon, the Greeks called Zeus. And Diodorus Siculus says the same thing, that the prophet, the eldest man of the priests, came out to him and said, I like this one, "Greetings, son, and take this form of address as from the god also," meaning the god says, "Greetings, son," to Alexander. And we also have from Arion, Alexander admired the sight, consulted the god, and received the answer which his heart desired. How do you show that you're God? Well, you need an attribute. And that's exactly what Alexander starts to have on his coins, to demonstrate not only that he's a hero with a story, not only that he's contested things and he's a winner, but that in fact he is now a deity. Like Heracles, through achievement, he has ascended. There's a third battle, Gaugamela, he wins. So good that I came after you, Ken, and I don't even feel any need to talk about these battles. And with that, all the rest, as they say, is history. The Kleos Cup, a real person, an image that's recognizable, boundary-breaking fame in many media, persona widely channeled after death. But the most important of all of these is that he's real. That's what we want from celebrities, isn't it? We want to know that they're not like us, but they're kind of like us. They're attainable in a way. And how I want to end here is just to demonstrate to you that that's the piece that Alexander really gives us and gave people even in antiquity. So let's go to Pompeii, where we just were. And, all right, so this got a little messed up, but there was a really beautiful image of Pompeii here before the House of the Faun got put on top of it. And in the, there's the image of Pompeii, there's the House of the Faun. This is where the mosaic was. The mosaic was on the floor. The mosaic was on the floor of a dining room. The mosaic was on the floor of a dining room so that people could sit around and talk about what they were seeing. Kent said, and maybe it's true, that the mosaic depicts the Battle of Issus. There's actually a certain amount of controversy about this. There's some things that don't exactly fit with the Battle of Issus. I don't care. It's a battle. He wins. That's not my point. Here's my point. We're in 100 BCE. We're a couple centuries after Alexander's death. And what does this mosaic artist want to show you? He wants to show you a real person. This is a dude without special attributes, without epic associations, This is somebody real, and what he accomplished still is remembered. Persona widely channeled after death. Well, you can widely channel a persona by attributes, but you need to kind of be in the culture to understand that. We do not see people today walking around with helmets or caduceus or thunderbolts. Alexander did have, however, one attribute that really captured his glamour persona, his kleos, with all the rest that accompanies that. And that was his hair. So, for example, you see this beautiful sculpture from the middle of the 2nd century CE. No diadem, no crown, no lion's head helmet, but this very, very particular leonine style of hair. And that persona is the one that has really manifested in the 2 millennia since Alexander's death. So here you see King George IV, you see George Brian Brummel with Alexander-like hair. I don't know how many people noticed this article in 2021 in the New York Times. There's a name for this, people. It's called TikTok hair. I'm serious. TikTok hair. And so all I want to say is, when it comes to the Kleos Cup, when it comes to celebrity, Jackie O and Princess Di and Taylor, fine. But you know what? Y'all need to wait about 2,000 years and see if you can measure up to the dude who started it all.